Hello, all. Have to say that I love Toronto. I love visiting Toronto, but one of the things I can't stand about Toronto is the parking.
I was gonna say the traffic.
Traffic. I mean, I've been to New York City. I've been to a lot of places. Traffic is traffic. You're going to run into it, and certain times of the day in Toronto, it's bad. But I
And
went
their
to
non-use of MasterCard. Toronto hates MasterCard for some reason.
That's weird.
well, and that sort of is ancillary to my story, Russ, because I went to a parking. There was a parking area a couple blocks from where I was going yesterday, and it was cash only, which is unbelievable. Every other place is credit card, and this one
Right.
is no cash only. Am I okay? Fine, great. So I searched around, and there was a parking ramp right across from the place I was going to. Go in there, and then the machine doesn't work, or it's like you wanted to get like the max amount for the time because I was going to be there till midnight or something like that, and I couldn't find the button on the keyboard. So I had to go to another parking ramp. So I go to the third one, and the machine works, and I pay the max, and no problem, and I put the slip on the dashboard like they tell you to do. And I go into the place that I went to, and I come out at 1 o'clock in the morning, and lo and behold, I get a ticket. And what do I get a ticket for? Not putting the thing on the dash. And it was there. Now this is the thing. I have a Honda Civic, and the Honda Civic has a two-tiered dash. One right up against the glass, right near where the glass and the body of the car meet, and then one that's a little lower down that's closer to the steering wheel. I put it on the steering wheel, but I put it on the level near the steering wheel, but in full view of somebody being able to scan or whatever, and they gave me the ticket anyway. So needless to say, after this webcast, I'm going to war with a parking ramp, going on, calling an 800 number, and basically going to go banana hammock if I don't get a refund on this ticket.
Good luck with that.
Yeah.
Fun. We're still fighting our ticket from Minnesota, so have fun.
It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Russ, my experiences in New York City, and the only difference between Toronto and New York City is that the prices in New York are higher. When I went, go ahead.
The only thing I can tell you about Toronto is, did I mention the time that my car got robbed there?
Oh.
No.
So we're heading to the draft. What year was the draft there, Mike? 2002? 2002, I think.
The Nash draft.
Yeah. And so we're heading there, and we pull up in front of somebody's hotel, and we're helping them out with stuff, and we go in there for a minute. I come back, and all my stuff's gone, like everything, my computer, everything. I had equipment with me to do a show. Luckily, I kept some of it in the trunk. And so basically they got my computer bag and all kinds of accessories and whatever, and I had to call the police to report it. And boy, I got to tell you, that was like the worst 2 hours of my life waiting for them to show up.
Yeah. Well, Chris Versteeg, when he was with the Leafs, his car got vandalized in the parking lot across the street from the Air Canada Center.
Yeah, I mean, it's just...
So, but when I went to New York City, me and some friends went down to Lower Manhattan to see the 9/11 museum and the new trade center, and the parking was $30.
For how long?
I mean, for like 3 or 4 hours.
That's not bad.
Well, I mean, but
Well, see, a lot of places in New York City, it might be $30 for 4 hours, but you can park for like 14 hours for like $39.
Right.
So because I drive in the city all the time, and it's like, so $40 for almost pretty much a full day isn't, you think about it, it's not bad. Boston's worse.
Boston's just made me an angry driver in general. Like, in general, I've just become angrier at people when I drive. So, and it's terrible to find. Parking's impossible to find. So.
Welcome to New England.
Well, I think Chicago's worse because there's no regulation. I was there for the Winter Classic, and there were people basically saying, park in my alley, and it was like $100.
see, Dillian, everything seems to be impossible in Boston. It's like my dream is to go to Fenway to see a Yankees-Red Sox game. I think I'd have a better chance if I sold my soul to the devil than to go on to Ticketmaster or go on to StubHub and get a ticket for a Red Sox-Yankees game.
Yeah, last season.
Wait a minute, you already have.
We went to one last season. The Red Sox were pretty terrible last season, so we got tickets right on the first baseline, probably about 17 rows up. Pretty cheap too. It was. I don't think we spent more than like $25 per ticket. Then you have the ticket fees from StubHub, which is always fun. But yeah, we got really lucky with that. So.
Well, I mean, I've looked a couple times and on StubHub over, and not last year because even though the Yankees made the playoffs, they weren't particularly exciting. When I saw it was like a couple $100 for a ticket.
Yeah, when you buy it the day of, because we live here, we can do that. We can buy them the day of, but when you look at tickets a couple months out, or they have the tiered ticketing. Like that's part of what they do is they for certain games and certain opponents and certain times of the day, tickets are more expensive. So we just happen to be lucky, and we live close enough that when you want to go to a game, and it was cheap.
Climb the Sicko sign. What's so hard about that?
Yeah, nobody wants to see the Tampa Rays. They have to pay people to watch.
That's a good though. Go like on a Wednesday afternoon game against Tampa. You get tickets for like $10.
Yeah, I want to see the Yankees. I want to see because I'm a Yankees fan. I'm sorry.
It's a fun rivalry. For as terrible as the Red Sox were, the fans were super into it. There was a lot of obviously Yankees fans there too, but the rivalry just creates a real game even when one of the teams isn't doing so well.
Yeah. Okay, couple in memoriams here, a few rest in pieces. It seems to be the typical thing that we do on the show, Russ. If it isn't somebody from our musical youth, it's somebody who we listen to on broadcasts or actors that we saw on shows. Most prominent one is Joe Garagiola, who Dan and Jillian, you're too young for this, but
I remember Joe Garagiola this week in baseball. Every Saturday afternoon, he was the play-by-play guy.
Yeah, the Saturday afternoon game was big for him. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember when I was a kid, we go play Little League, we come back, and I think it was Costas and Garagiola doing the game.
It might have been because I know it was Garagiola and Scully and Garagiola.
Yeah, I remember in the mid '80s. I remember that quite clearly.
Yeah, and Russ, in the '70s, it was him and Tony Kubek, and I thought
I watched a ton of those. Yeah.
This is young people don't understand. This is before cable was really out there, and the only baseball game that we would get would be that Saturday afternoon game on NBC.
It was a big deal. I remember that.
That was the only national game you got.
Right, exactly. And until cable came into its into its own in the late 70s and the early 80s. I know that in Buffalo we got WR out of New York, and that gave us Mets games. We got WPIX out of New York, and that gave us Yankee games. For a time we had WSBK out of Boston, and we got Red Sox games. And TBS with the Atlanta Braves. But until then, the only time we saw baseball was those Monday night ABC games with Howard Cosell jumping all over Keith Jackson when he was or Al Michaels or whoever else the announcer was. He would take over as the announcer even though he was the color guy.
Yep.
And Garagiola and Scully or Kubek on NBC.
Yeah, the beauty of Garagiola was he just sort of kept it simple and had good homespun humor, and he wasn't a great player, but he knew the game inside out, and so you felt like you were just like watching the game with like your uncle, and that was the good thing about it.
Yeah, that's the best way to describe it. It was like you were with your uncle on the couch, watching the game. That's perfect.
Now, Dan, who was the person that you said that you were?
Fife Dog passed away yesterday, 45 years old. One of the members of the hip-hop group A Tribe Called Quest that has hands down one of the greatest albums of all time, The Low End Theory, which came out in the early 90s, 92 I believe. And it's just absolutely, I was growing up in Connecticut as a kid, you didn't really hear hip-hop in the suburbs. Right. It never really got out there. And this was one of the groups that really transcended music, and while, I never really grew up, I never really liked gangster rap. I never really liked the real violent stuff. These guys were clever. They were creative. They rapped a lot with live jazz bands. It was just very, very innovative and ahead of their time. And there's a great documentary called Beats, Rhymes, and Life done by Michael Rappaport a few years ago that really details who they influenced too. People like The Roots, Kanye West, Pharrell, a lot of the big names now all credit them for being relevant. So very sad news, and I was lucky enough, I saw them open for the Beastie Boys at Madison Square Garden many years ago, and that was one of the greatest shows I've ever been to.
Yeah, especially 45 years old. Wow.
He had battled diabetes his entire life.
Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah.
And the other one was Ken Howard, and people of our generation, Russ, will remember him in the show on CBS, The White Shadow, Longtime character actor. I know he was. I think he was head of the actors union.
He was.
But only 71 years old, and he was recently in that movie with Robert Downey Jr. and Robert Duvall, the judge. He was the actual judge in the trial.
Wasn't there some basketball show he was on?
Well, that's what we're saying, The White Shadow.
Yeah. I remember watching that. Like MSG used to show reruns of that, and I would watch it.
Yeah, I mean, if
He
you
wasn't
watch,
a good actor. The show was good because of the basketball play. I didn't watch it because of his acting. I'll be honest.
No, that's fair.
he was a character actor. He was not a star actor. He never had like a breakout role. He was just like in movies. He was always like the a lawyer or the father-in-law or the judge or this.
Yeah, they had a good cast. The cast who played the basketball players was ensemble, and they had like one of the Van Pattens, one of the Van Pattens, and it was that part of it was good.
Yeah, the funny thing is that the most famous person from that show is not an actor. It's besides Ken Howard. Tim Van Patten directed like a lot of Boardwalk Empires and Sopranos episodes, so he's very, very prominent. But yeah, again, 71 years old. So one last non-hockey thing, then we'll get to talk about some of the games and things in the news. Alex Rodriguez, who I'm sure is very popular to a lot of people out there, has announced that he will retire at the end of his contract at the end of the 2017 season. I think he's something like 55 home runs away from Barry Bonds. Russ, if he's 15 home runs away, he's not retiring. He's going to hook on somewhere as a DH and try to break the record.
Yeah, but in his mind, he's going to be there, so that's why he announced his retirement. He's always, like, wanting the spotlight. He is just, it's like a cry for help. Who the hell announces they're quitting 2 years before they quit? Like, this is just
an egomaniac. An egomaniac does.
Yeah, it's just typical Alex Rodriguez. It's like, so now we got to hear about it for, like, the next 2 years. It's ridiculous. I don't know what's worse. This announcement or that shirtless picture he took that time in Central Park with someone rubbing his shoulders. You could pick it.
Jillian, this is the thing. I mean, Alex Rodriguez to me he's always struck me as somebody who wanted to be as popular, wanted to be as notable as a guy like Derek Jeter. And to me, this is a cry for like, I want my own farewell tour. So
Poppy's getting one this year, so I guess he just had to make sure he was going to get one that was longer,
Yeah, well, and of course, Poppy did the absolute wrong thing by saying like the people at Yankee Stadium, I think it was, they should give me a standing ovation. I'm telling you right now, they're going to throw broken glass at him. There's no way that he's going to get a standing ovation. Now, I'll give the Fenway crowd their props. When Jeter was there and that was the final game, they gave him a standing ovation. It was always respectful with Jeter. They booed him, but because he was the enemy. But David Ortiz, and David Ortiz is great. I mean, we can debate whether he's a Hall of Famer or not. I mean, the steroid issue is one thing with both him and A-Rod. But you don't like A-Rod would do something as stupid as that, saying I go to Fenway, the people of Fenway should bow, and you don't do that.
If Ortiz didn't open his mouth, I bet you he would have got a nice response.
I agree. I agree completely. Yeah. If when you say you deserve it, that's when people are like, wait a second, no, you don't. You don't deserve my applause.
Yeah.
I deserve the presidency, said Donald Trump. Okay.
That's another can of worms.
Yeah, let's not go there. We'll be on the air for 2 hours. Okay, let's start the show. Hello, Hockey World. Today is Thursday, March 24th, 2016.
I'm Dan Petru.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
I'm Jillian Fisher.
And I'm Michael Agello, and this is the HockeyBuzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. Well, last night we had a light schedule, but not an inconsequential schedule in the NHL. 2 games. First one in Brooklyn as the New York Islanders beat the Ottawa Senators 3-1 and break their 4-game losing streak. Dan, I mean, we're starting to get into the territory where I thought the Islanders might be in danger. I mean, it's getting pretty close. Philadelphia's still playing well, even though they blew a 2-goal lead in the last minute and 4 seconds in Columbus. Lost a game in Pittsburgh, but they pulled even with Detroit. They were 2 points behind the Islanders. The Islanders had a game in hand, and they won that game in hand. I mean, is there a sense of, is there fear in Islanders Nation right now that the team is collapsing.
Yes, because they've done this the last couple of years in a row. They did not finish strong last year. 3 seasons ago, when the lockout season, they also stumbled and backed into their way into the playoffs. It seems to be a Capuano trait of not finishing well. Honestly, after the Flyers game, if you told me Capuano was going to be fired, I wouldn't have been shocked, because last night was better. It was better. They took advantage of a team that, quite frankly, stinks. And it wasn't perfect. It wasn't their best game by far, but they have not been able to play like even 40 solid minutes of cohesive hockey in a long time. So at least they put 2 solid periods together yesterday, and they did enough to get the win. There's still lots of room for improvement, and they're still not going great up front, but they played well last night, and Berube played great in net, and I would go back to him, I think, tomorrow night.
Russ, I mean, I looked at the 4-game losing streak. I looked at the way that they were playing, and I've been a little harder on Thomas Greiss than most people. I just don't think he's up to the job of being the number one and having to play game after game after game. I mean, to me, Berube playing well yesterday is good news for Capuano, because at least he can go to him in back-to-back situations and have a little bit of confidence.
Yeah, Berube looked good. By the way, I have to get this in. I'm going to be at the Overlook Bar Saturday night, 6 o'clock. East 44th Street, Manhattan. It's an Islanders viewing party, and I'll be talking about their prospects. So definitely come out there. And I'm even going to have some Met books to sign, because there's a lot of Islander-Mets crossover, as Dan knows. But,
yeah, it's usually Mets, Islanders, Jets, Rangers, Giants, and Yankees. That's usually the way it goes.
New Jersey Devils. Rude.
It's easy to forget them.
But Berube played a great game.
And that Mets-Jets thing just shows a consistency of lack of intelligence, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah, we're not going to go there.
No, but it's hard to get on Greiss when the team scores 8 goals in 7 games.
And I was going to say, the biggest thing they did was bury the puck yesterday. You know, Nelson gets a rebound, he buries it. Tavares is in the slot, he buries it. That's what they have to do. They've got to do that more often. They've got guys that are capable of scoring. They have guys that are capable of scoring down low, too. They just don't do it enough.
They don't go there enough, Russ. That's the problem.
Anders Lee lived in the crease last year.
Right.
If he does that again, he'll score again. I mean, it's just it's really simple. I did see Hamonic a little more aggressive, too, shooting the puck a little better. Like that, you know, again, he's not known for his offense, but he's got an accurate shot. Just shoot the puck. They got Pulak in the lineup. Keep him in the lineup for 2 weeks. Like I said yesterday, just keep him in there. You know what straight is. You don't know what Pulak is. So I think this was big for the Islanders, but I think the biggest cry for help, and I love Howie Rose, but at the end of the game, saying that the magic number was 15, he shouldn't have said it.
Wow. Count. I mean,
it's too early to talk about that. When it's like the magic number's 2, you can say.
Right.
Yeah, and Russ, as you pointed out yesterday, that and they finally announced the rescheduling of that game. I mean, we're talking about the snow out game between the Islanders and the Islanders, and they rescheduled it for the last Sunday of the regular season, April 10th. So you potentially could have. I mean, it could mean nothing for the Islanders if they maintain that distance, but. I mean, okay, you're the Islanders. That game means nothing to you. Do you sit Tavares and let Philadelphia play against basically Bridgeport?
No, because they hate Philadelphia, so they're not going to do that. No.
Dan?
Yeah, I don't think there's any reason to sit anybody. Maybe you start Berube instead of Greiss if everything's locked up. If you've decided Greiss is your number 1 goalie going into the playoffs, maybe you rest him. Maybe you play Tavares and you give him third line minutes, but you're gonna play. I mean, he's gonna play on the power play and things of that nature.
Now, the other game on the schedule last night was the Rangers and Boston Bruins. Rangers win 5-2. Boston pulls Tuukka Rask midway through the game, and apparently because Boston plays against Florida tonight after a long road trip, and I guess they put Gustafsson in, and now they'll go with Rask on back-to-back nights. Boston has lost 4 games in a row, so prediction about the Bruins being the team that might be in trouble. I mean, it has a little more merit, but if you look at the standings right now, I mean, the Rangers with the win are at 92 points. They're second in the conference right now, but they're second in the division behind the Caps. Boston has 86 points. They still have 3 points up on Philadelphia, but Philadelphia has 2 games in hand, and Detroit is at 83 with a game in hand on Boston. Russ, do you think they're in trouble? Because I just don't get that feeling this year.
I don't think they're in trouble, but they were awfully flat in that Ranger game, and some weird things happened, and I saw Claude Julien react way over the top, way more than you usually see Claude Julien react. Like, there was a play where, and I forget who shot the puck, but the Rangers have it, they're shooting on Boston, and it hits up, and it looks like it might hit the net. But when a puck comes down, it doesn't get whistled. The Rangers pick it up and say, oh, okay, throw it in front of the net, and I think that might have been the Zuccarello goal or it was the second goal. And so all of a sudden, there's a goal, and Julien just flips out, right? And even NBC, who after a commercial superimposed, like they blew it up as much as they can blow up, and you just couldn't see that the puck hit the net. So, they had to call that a good goal. That was weird. There was a David Krejci holding call, which was awful. It was just, he didn't even get close to holding a Ranger. And that gave the Rangers an early power play, and the Rangers were clicking on the power play. And so it took Boston out of the game pretty quick, but Rask didn't have it, and Boston didn't have it early on. And that's a little worrisome. I mean, look, Lee Stempniak scored, so all is well, right? Because at the end of the game, Henrik Lundqvist said, hey, I wonder if we did something to Lee Stempniak. I don't think we were mean to him here. I wonder what the deal is. Like, he was kidding around because he scored every game since they played against his old team, or at least, he was a partial Ranger, right? And I think Boston's okay. And actually, I saw that they called up Brandon Carlo and put him in Providence. We'll see how he does in Providence. He's a big body. If for some reason he really kicks it in gear there, maybe that's a guy that they end up using at the end of the season. We'll see.
Jillian, you're in Boston. I mean, is there starting to be a feeling that this is a repeat of last year, where they miss out of the playoffs, in the last couple games of the season? I mean, if that happens, I'm sure that Don Sweeney, even though they went out and got John Michael Lyles and brought in Stempniak, that there might be starting to be some criticism against him and against Claude Julien. Although I think he's done a great job this year. What's the feeling there?
There's no sense of panic, honestly. I mean, I'm sure people would be happier if they were doing better. But there's a lot of faith in Tuukka Rask around here. People are really very confident in his ability to win a game for them if need to be. So I think if they continue on and this is how the pattern, they can't break that losing streak or they continue to lose like that, that panic may set in a little bit, but it hasn't hit yet.
Dan, I think Boston has enough to get to the finish line. I think
they do too.
To me, the team that I've stuck with this, and right now it's being borne out, but it may change in the last 10 games. To me, it's Detroit.
Right.
Detroit has been. Their older players, a guy like Datsuk is clearly playing injured. Some of their younger guys who were impressive a couple years ago, guys like Nyquist and Tatar, aren't playing at as high a level as they did. Dylan Larkin is one of the best rookies in the game, and I think they have some good players. But I can't tell you what it is. I just get this feeling that Detroit is the team that if Philadelphia catches anybody and beats anybody
they just they don't score enough. They don't they don't seem to be putting the puck in consistently. They have to work really hard for all their goals. Their defense has been a little shaky. Some of their younger players have hit a wall, and some of their players that they've definitely relied on have had disappointing years. Yeah. Maybe it's the year after Babcock. I don't know. But it's definitely it just seems like they just have to work so hard for their scoring chances and their goals. And they're definitely a young team, but at the same time, they kind of seem a little old at the same time with some of their older players. I think if anybody doesn't make it, if I had to choose, I would think it would be Detroit. Now, look, they have all the years of making it in a row. It's been 22 years that they made it in a row, something like that, something insane.
Mm-hmm.
But
23, something like that.
Yeah. So obviously, they're probably not fazed by it. But if I had to choose right now, they probably would be the team out. And if Philadelphia, look, obviously Washington's going to be the favorite, whoever they play, going into the playoffs. But if I'm Washington, the last thing I want to see is a conference rival like the Flyers in the first round.
Russ, I've been operating under the philosophy, and I think one of the things that with Detroit is when you've had a coach like Babcock who was there for 9 years, who was constantly cracking the whip, being very structured, very limiting, and then all of a sudden you go to a guy who is more player friendly, than Babcock. Psychologically, I think some of these players take their foot off the gas pedal a little bit.
I'm not seeing it though. I mean, I watched these players. I was in their locker room. I don't think that's happened. I think you went through the natural lull that they're going to go through. They're not a great team, but I still think at the end of the day, Datsuk, Zetterberg, those guys are going to get them in. Philly's got these back-to-back games, which I think are going to kill them because either Mason's going to have to deal with them all, or they're going to have to figure out. The biggest talk in Philly is when are we going to use Anthony Stolarz? If that's your biggest talk, you do have a problem when you're looking at it. And it's not a knock on Stolarz. He doesn't have any NHL experience. Like, it's just going to be tough to even throw him in there.
Right. Do you run Mason into the ground? I mean, you got to get. So you have to think Stolarz has to play like one of these games, right?
Well, I don't know.
What they might do is what Boston just did. They may you start Mason both ends of the back-to-back, and if he gets blown out or if he's losing, then you bring in Stolarz.
I think that would be smart, right?
I think that's what's going to end up happening. Okay, so in the news, the name of Ilya Kovalchuk came up a couple weeks ago when he was being scratched by SKA St. Petersburg. At that point, it was just around the trade deadline, and there was some indication that he might even leave then and join an NHL team, and then it moved to he may come back to the NHL next year. Now a report comes out that sources tell Russian media that Ilya Kovalchuk is leaving SKA St. Petersburg to join the KHL's expansion team in China next season.
If there's more money.
Have we heard the last of Ilya Kovalchuk, Russ?
No, I mean, you'll never hear the last of him, and that's what's annoying about it is I covered his draft, right? That was my first draft in 2001, and we all knew that he had star potential. And look, he's more than a point a game in the NHL, so he does, but he's also like a minus 85 or 115 in the NHL too, which might prevent him from getting in the Hall of Fame one day. The disappointing part is he's had a 12-year career in the NHL. That's what's disappointing because at the end of the day, when you play in the KHL, you're not playing against great talent. You're playing against like average talent, and there's some great players there. That's really what it is. So now he's just chasing the money, and it's sad for me because it's like, why are you going to go play for this team that's a startup team because you want to see your name in lights and you want to get like $10 million? What'll happen is he'll come crawling back to the NHL when he's like 35, 36, and maybe he'll do something, maybe he won't, but I don't think anybody's going to care. And I just think he's really tarnished his image, and I don't think he cares about that either, but I seem to care for some reason.
Well,
I think.
Go ahead, Dan.
Well, I think, even if he came back to the NHL next year, and he's not obviously what he was 10 years ago or even 5 years ago, I still think he's talented enough to put up 40 to 50 points.
Yeah.
And I still think you probably have about another, 300 or 400 points left in his NHL career. And with that being said, I mean, this just reeks of the famous Randy Moss quote when he was asked, "How do you pay your fines?" And he says, "Straight cash, homie." That's what this is. This is straight cash.
Oh yeah.
Well, I think there's a comparative here, Jillian, between this situation and Jaromir Jagr after he played in the KHL. He played 3 years. I think it was in Omsk. And he comes back to the NHL, he wants to come back to the NHL, and there was not a ton of interest. I remember there was the distinct possibility of him going to Edmonton. And then he ended up, I don't even remember who
Philly?
Philly? He came to Philly.
It was Philly.
Yeah, it was Philly, which was a big deal because he was Pittsburgh, so.
Right, and now the thing is, he proved when he came back that he was still an effective player. But at that point, the perception out there was he's over the hill. People remembered what he was like in Washington, that he didn't have any work ethic. Now you say that, and it's completely the opposite because has a completely different mindset. But back then, and you hear the stuff about Kovalchuk that he's overweight, that he can't play in the NHL anymore, and maybe the interest wasn't there that he thought there was going to be in the NHL, and that's why he's opting to go to this expansion franchise in China.
Yeah, I mean, and with Jagr, I mean, he came back and he proved that he is still talented and he still has the work ethic and he's still proving it. I think that teams also know that he's there for that short-term contract. So with Kovalchuk, it's like he's a flight risk, so he would have to prove that he still has that ability to put up those numbers and show that he has that work ethic. But it's also going to be all about the money for him too. So if the expansion league in China is going to give him that kind of money, I think that's where he's going to go. Because it's all short-term for him.
Yeah,
I can give you a quote.
Good.
One time I was writing for the Goalie News magazine, and I was interviewing Jamie Storr, who was a top draft pick of the Kings back in the day.
Yeah.
And Jamie Storr was playing overseas, and I said, Jamie, why are you playing overseas? And he goes, I need to put another wing on my house.
Yeah. Yeah. I get it.
Well, yeah, I mean,
I just don't think he should expect anybody to be begging for him to come back. If that's what he's hoping for, then that's not going to happen. So.
yeah, well, I mean, there's certain players. I mean, you remember the Radulov situation, and that was a unique one. But the thing is, he came back. I think he was still on his entry level, Russ. And when he came back and he finished off that year, now he's an RFA. I don't know if Nashville has any rights to him.
Not an RFA. That's why he came back. The only reason Radulov came back was to get out of the Nashville deal, so then if someday he wants to come back again, then he can sign a bigger deal. So that was all money related, and he just wanted to sort of get rid of the stigma of Nashville. So Radulov's no better.
And Burmistrov came back.
Burmistrov's
a different story.
Yeah,
he's actually a hard-working player.
Burmistrov came back because Claude Noel was gone.
That's right.
That was the whole reason. If Claude Noel was still coaching in Winnipeg, he'd still be playing in Moscow someplace.
And as much as we say this, as much as I say Kovalchuk's not the player he was, and he's selfish and all he cares about money, I'd be intrigued putting him next to Tavares on a one-year deal.
Nah, you don't want to do that.
I'm so desperate for a winger. I just
That's like Alexei Yashin light. You don't want to do that.
Oh no, Yashin was not the. Believe me, you cannot. Look, Yashin underperformed. He was not. Kovalchuk is not the person that Yashin is. Yashin
well, that's
is
what I said. Light.
Yeah. Yashin is a class act. Yashin would. Those are some terrible teams. They would lose 6-1, and he'd be a -3, and he'd sit outside in the pouring rain and talk to fans for 45 minutes after the game. He's by far one of the most personal people I've ever met.
For me, the only reason to sign Alexei Yashin is to have Carol Alt in the stands, but that's just me. Okay, Jonathan Drouin.
Oh boy.
The gift that keeps on giving, Russ. Now, okay, we know that he made a mistake. We know that his agent made a mistake doing what they did, going head-to-head with Steve Yzerman. They blinked. He goes back to the Syracuse Crunch. He's trying to rehabilitate himself, get back in the good graces of the Tampa organization, or at least prove to other NHL teams that he's the talent that he is. And not to say this is like a destructive incident, but he overslept. He missed a team practice, and now he's been suspended for a game by the Syracuse Crunch.
Oh, sorry, my alarm clock's going off. Look how easy it was to set an alarm.
So,
you're a grown man. You can set an alarm. Sorry.
If this was a standalone thing, Russ, this would not be that big of a deal. But on top of the other stuff that's happened, there is something that is to be said for all these things. They smell and smack of character issues, and this just goes along with it, doesn't it?
I mean, look, he's got 9 points in 13 games, so obviously he could still score, and some of those points are more recent than they were before. Here's the thing. If Daniel Walcott on that same team oversleeps, do you hear about it, Mike?
No.
And that's the problem. Now, any little thing that happens with Jonathan Drouin, it gets reported to the media, and everybody makes a big deal out of it.
That's what happens when you get a reputation. You get a reputation for a reason.
Right.
But I don't think all the reputation's on him. I think his agent helped him earn that reputation too.
So I think just does nothing without players' consent.
Yeah, I don't know. Yes and no.
I talked to a lot of players, and they said our agents have never done anything we have not asked them to do.
No, but they'll say, "Hey, don't you think this is the best way for you to do this?" And you're going to agree or not agree.
I guess my biggest problem with this whole situation is where's his parents through all this? I mean, because he was a young kid. Where's his parents? When's your parent? Like, I know my dad would say, "Shut up, go to the AHL, suck it up, earn your keep." That's what my dad would say.
And this is probably the last thing that the Tampa organization wanted to do after all this crap over the last couple months. With this, what they wanted to do was reestablish his value, reestablish his confidence. So either when he comes back and plays with Tampa next year, he's of a more positive mind, or to improve his value, to reinvigorate his value, and in the summer trade him and get as close to full value as he can. Now, I think having to suspend him for a game in this incident sort of knocks that down a peg. And now, the perception out there is he's a troubled child. And I don't think that now he can shake that. And so if this was a standalone thing, I don't think it would have been a problem. I mean, there were players on the Leafs last year during that ridiculous season that missed practices. They overslept or their car broke down, and it wasn't that big of a deal. It was a one-day thing. But
it's also not in the very – not that Tampa's not hard, but their media is not as tough on their players. Like, that's not like you're coming – the Northeast, I mean, Philly, Boston, New York, if this stuff was happening up in the Northeast, I mean, he'd be done for, because you can't do that kind of stuff. So not that they're not a tough market, it's just that he has a little bit easier. I think he can come back from it if he really wanted to.
I think, and I think that's true, but I also think this is coming from the Canadian media, who's following every move he makes, and that's why it's all being broadcast. And so I think
that's a good point, Russ.
They're the ones pushing this a bit.
Yeah. Well, how about this, Jillian? How about if the rumors that Montreal were interested in him came to pass, and he had been traded to the Canadiens, and he had overslept a Habs practice?
Oh,
it'd be a big deal.
It'd be done. He'd be done for. I mean, they would never let him hear the end of it.
Break out the guillotine.
Absolutely.
But if you don't think he can overcome this, he can, because the minute he gets to whatever NHL team he's going to get to, if he scores 15 to 17 goals in his rookie season, it's all forgotten.
That's right. That's what he has to do. He has to prove himself in the NHL, and that will clean his slate. If he goes somewhere else, he puts up a 40 to 50 point season, all is good.
But Tampa, see, the thing is, Dan, Tampa Bay contributed to this by the way that they approached him.
They did.
It's very unusual for a team that was a competitive team to finish 28th in the league or wherever they finished, draft 3rd overall, and bring in a kid of Drouin's talent. And they decided to treat him like, okay, we're going to keep him in junior an extra year. We're going to bring him along slowly. We're going to put him on the 3rd or 4th line. And this kid, was a superstar scorer in the CHL. He expects to play top 6 minutes. So he's of a completely different mindset than what Tampa had in mind for him. And I think that's where this clashes. And I don't think that's going to change. I'm in the minority. I think they're better off to trade him and get as much value for him as they can.
Yeah, I mean, I think at this point, look, I don't know if you're going to get full market value for him. I don't know if you are. So at this point, maybe you're taking a team's best prospect in a first-round pick. I don't think you're going to get 3 pieces for him.
I don't think so either, but I'm telling you, if I get the hint that I'm losing Steve Stamkos, I'm holding on to him. I don't care.
I agree. I absolutely agree.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and we'll only discuss that about 500 more times before.
There'll be an opportunity, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I was up at a speaker series up in Toronto, taught with a bunch of hockey people, and Stamkos his name came up once or twice, I think. Okay. Yeah, just a bit. Interesting and rather disturbing story. I'm not going to go into the details of it, but Garrett Ross, a minor league player for the Rockford Ice Hogs, was suspended by the club. He was charged with a felony for what is commonly known as revenge porn. I'm not going to go into the details of this, but the Blackhawks released a statement that they learned of the legal proceedings against Ross, and at the time they've excused him from team activities pending a preliminary review of the matter. Jillian, the thing is, I mean, this is now becoming, I mean, it's not common, but it's come up a few times this year. One with Patrick Kane with the incident that happened over the summer, and that dragged on through the beginning of through training camp, through the beginning of the season. Russ and I were in Buffalo during the All-American Prospect game in September, and that was when the story about the evidence that was found and it was tampered with or whatever happened. I mean, it was a really bizarre situation, but he played, even though there was a lot of people saying he shouldn't play until it was cleared up, and he played through the training camp, and now he's probably going to win the Hart Trophy. And Evander Kane, in a similar situation, was accused of some sort of misconduct, and he has been cleared. But this seems to be coming up more and more often. This is not something common for the NHL. It seems to be more common with NFL players, with players in baseball, but not the NHL. How do you
NBA too? There's Kevin Johnson in the NBA now that
and Kobe Bryant back in the day. I mean, how do you think the NHL is handling this as opposed to the other sports?
I think it's a very touchy subject. It's hard, and it's something that I think all the leagues have a problem with. I think that they just don't know how to address the issue without feeling like they're throwing somebody or accusing somebody of something that they may not have done. I mean, I never want to be accused of something that I didn't do or be blamed for something that didn't actually happen. So it's a fine line you're walking. I think the biggest thing that they're missing is it sounds like they're a little tone deaf. Like all people really want, I think, to hear is just maybe an acknowledgement of they've been accused of this crime or this act, and let's move forward, or we're not going to comment on it. I think it's like the fact that the Blackhawks decided at a certain point that when that whole saga was going on, at the same time they announced they were going to have his bobblehead night. It's like, can you just wait for the bobblehead? Just wait for it. Or even Colorado recently, they had their goalie was being, I think he was in a criminal case with his ex-girlfriend, and they named him the star of the week that exact week the court case started. It's like, can you just, it sounds, coming from a female, it sounds a little bit like you're tone deaf. Like, those are sensitive issues, and listen, if they're innocent, I don't want them to be guilty. I don't want anybody to think that they're found guilty. I can't stress that enough, because that's something that I think people misconstrue a little bit, is that they think that, well, you're making them guilty before they had a chance to be tried. But I think you also have to remember that just an acknowledgement, maybe hold off on the bobblehead announcement. Yep. That's not that much to ask for, I don't think.
I think there's some progress, because I remember the Brett Favre situation when he was on the Jets, having that text to a female reporter, right, or a female worker on the team, and that sort of got laughed off. That was horrible.
Yeah, was it? And she was in the locker room. Was that one where in the locker room, right? Yeah. And I think that the NHL is different too, because it doesn't have as many instances that come up, or when they do, I know there was the LA Kings player last year. I mean, people had different opinions on it, but he ended up, I thought that they did a pretty decent job compared to some of the other leagues on how they handled it. I mean, it was addressed quickly, and then it was done, which is what it should be. There's no need to talk about the he said, she said, what actually happened. We're not the court. We're not the law. We shouldn't be deciding that. And I think just an acknowledgement from the team, there is this open case, or he's been accused of this, and that's all we're commenting on. He can still play. I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
I think the league that was proactive with Voinov. Like, there was charges. You're not playing until this is settled, and then when you're found guilty, you ain't coming back. You know, it's that simple. And in this case too, I think the difference with the two Kane cases, there were no charges ever brought up. There's charges here. This is also much easier proved than a he said, she said incident that happened in a hotel. And this one is, you either uploaded something or you didn't. And there's a trail of that, and we'll find that. If this guy's guilty, this is going to be something that'll be much easier for a court to prove than something to happen behind closed doors.
Well, the leagues have to be careful about the precedent of, I mean, in the court of law, you're innocent until proven guilty, and that was the whole thing with the Kane thing. Is like, okay, you want him to sit out, but you don't know whether he's guilty or not. So wait until there's an indictment, wait until there are charges brought, and then make a decision. And I know that there was a rather notable case with and this is not a hockey player but a hockey commentator up in Canada who was accused of some sort of a misdemeanor domestic violence. He was completely lost his job. He was wiped. The slate was wiped clean. You didn't even hear about him anymore. And then last month, the charges were dropped. Well, I don't see this guy back on the cable company or the broadcast network that he was on. His career is ruined because now you could say it was ruined because he did what he did. But if there wasn't charges brought, then you destroyed his career for something that it wasn't even illegal.
Well, I think too there needs to be some kind of precedent where, okay, something happens and charges have been filed. Then you know what, because look, if we were working in an office and charge it, we probably wouldn't work until this was settled. So you don't work, your charges are filed, okay, the case is dropped, you come back, and we go from there. But I definitely think the league needs to get out of front, not just this, just the conduct of its players. Because correct me if I'm wrong, Jarrett Stahl never got any kind of supplementary discipline. Richards never got any supplementary discipline. They did stupid things.
No,
Richards did? Okay.
Richards did?
He was suspended for X amount of games.
Okay, but if you do some of this conduct, if this stuff happens and you get arrested, if you get arrested and you do stupid things, I think the league needs to get out in front of this and hammer some of these players.
I believe Richards, the charges against him are still pending, but basically the Capitals, before they signed him, did their due diligence to find out whether he was going to get suspended by the league or whether he was going to get charged. I mean, I think like most of that stuff is going to come into.
I think Ryan O'Reilly should have got a few games for driving through at Tim Hortons. I'm sorry, if you get liquored up and do that, you're setting a bad example for the league. Sit for 10 games.
It's not just violence against women. It's not. There's a lot of things that go under that code of conduct.
Exactly.
That create a culture of it's okay if something bad happens because you're Kane and you make a lot of money and you're essentially half of the face of the team, and there needs to be and Kane's a different story because he was only ever accused, he was never charged. That's a different story, but there's
you could have popped him for the cab driver though. You could have popped him a few games for the cab driver incident.
Yeah, because he was charged with that, correct?
Right.
With that one?
Or when he was passed out at that bar in the college campus, there was video everywhere. That you could have popped him for that too.
He's had his fair share of dealings with the law. So.
Come on, he got lost and he drifted into a dorm party.
But the league cannot create a sense of entitlement. They need to be proactive. Like, this is not acceptable. It wouldn't be acceptable if you were working in a corporation. You got to go away for a few games, learn your lesson, and just lay down the law. I think you got to get ahead of it.
Yeah, and I think being open and upfront about it. I think when there's when they don't know how to address it, when every time it seems to get addressed differently,
yes,
I think that creates a problem too. Like if somebody's being accused of something, that's one thing. If somebody's being charged of something, that's another thing. And those should be two different statements, releases from the league or from the team, but they need to know there should be a regimented way to handle it. I think that there just seems to be a different way that it gets handled every time, and that's where I think it causes some frustration too.
I think that's the legal system, because I looked up Stahl and he pleaded out, and so even though he was charged, he pleaded out. So then what's a league supposed to do when a guy pleads out like that?
He's still guilty. He's admission of guilt.
Right, but it was a misdemeanor, and if you remember, I'm pretty sure Voynov pleaded out to a misdemeanor, but the whole problem was he was going to have his visa yanked by the U.S. government, and that's why there was no point for the Kings to fight this or go through this PR battle, because they would have somebody who was accused of the domestic violence that he perpetrated. I said at that.
Right, Mike. Richards didn't get suspended, but he still didn't play for a year either. So call it what you want.
Sure. I mean, right.
The other thing too is the NHL will always say it's going under its investigation with the players' discipline, with the code of conduct, but that's just such a vague statement, and we don't need to be privy to that information, but it just seems to be a varies from player to player, from situation to situation, and kind of makes me question really what is going on, what is the code of conduct that they're abiding by.
Well, right. And look, in the Stahl case, you went to Las Vegas, you got coked up, okay, you admitted to it, you served your time, you did your fine. We don't approve of that. You're going to the substance abuse program, and you're sitting for 5 games.
Well, the question I have, and there's no way to know this, but I mean the difference here between the Patrick Kane situation and the Garrett Ross situation is Garrett Ross was charged. He was charged with a felony. The question is whether if Patrick Kane had been charged with a felony based on the fact that Patrick Kane is the best or the second best player in that organization and not an AHLer, a 23-year-old AHLer who may never have any major impact, is whether they would have suspended him as they did Ross. I don't know. I don't think so, but
I don't feel good about saying that they would. I don't.
Well, but here's the thing. The flip side is
I don't want to touch that one.
Voynov got a 76-game suspension. He was the second best defenseman on that team. So, and he was a star for them. So I think it does happen. I think
the playoffs too. They had a hole there they couldn't solve.
Right. Yeah. Right.
I think the other thing with Garrett, the situation where he was charged with it, is that he played just on Friday, and this happened in February. So I feel like somebody has to be responsible for knowing if your player is being charged with a felony. That to me is a little bit iffy. Like, what do you mean this happened in February and the coach sat him on the bench for a game and then he was playing the next game, and just now they decided to do something probably because it got out in the media. And that's the way that the social media works now, is it gets out and it's no longer easy to kind of sweep under the rug, and it seems like that's kind of, they were hoping it didn't get brought up as much, but that's, to me, that's a why wait a month to do something?
Some of it's optics too. Like Donald Brashear, what he got pulled over doing like 105, right? That's a felony.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. At that point, Jillian, they can't control the story anymore because it's out.
It gets out, and social media runs with it, and it just, that's the other problem too, is when we have to sit here and have this conversation about it, that shows that there's a problem, and it just, when you go and look on social media, you can see that that's a problem. All of the negative comments you see and people attacking each other, it shouldn't have to be like that. The NHL should take some type of responsibility for that and say, this is what we're going to do.
I know teams, like I know, for example, there was a minor league player who had who was close to be, he was up and down with the NHL team, and he had a serious drug problem. And the team said, look, you have a problem. You need to address this. And he's like, no, I don't have a problem. He was in complete denial. And they didn't qualify him. They let him go. And he caught on with another team, and actually since then he's cleaned up his life. But, I mean, that's a situation where the team was like, unless you get help, you can't be with us.
It is up to the team. And, like, I felt like the Kings are a team that draws a very hard line. And definitely,
I thought the Kings did a pretty good job with they did a good job with the Voinov situation.
But that's the thing. There are going to be teams that you feel like handles it great, and there are going to be other teams that you feel like doesn't handle it great, and that's always a problem in sports because there is no sort of way that everybody should handle it, and they probably should spell it out.
And it's going to be different depending on the player, because look at Kane. I mean, if he, like we had said before, he's a superstar. Right. If that doesn't happen to that kind of level of player, it gets handled differently. So it is tough. It is tough to figure out how to handle it, because if it happens to somebody like Sidney Crosby, could you imagine what the NHL would have done? I think there's just a lot that they can learn going forward with each of these situations. You know, one of the things that was just interesting is after the whole Kane situation, they released their own report on it, and I think that's where it kind of gets like a little iffy to me. That's where it's like the NHL doesn't need to release that kind of report, I don't think.
Yeah, see, I think if they were smart, they would send out a survey, like basically call in a focus group of female fans and maybe even female media members and do that, because, like, look, we're guys. We're not going to know exactly how it's going to affect you, and leagues nowadays are reaching out to female audiences. They want them as fans. They want them to spend their money, and if they do, then they should really want to hear their opinions, too.
I agree with your point, Julia. That report that came out about Kane, it smacked me of the same thing as like the Wells report with the Tom Brady. Yeah. It's like this extra investigative. I mean, I think they probably gleaned most of that information. They didn't have their own independent investigative body. They probably gleaned it all from the police report. So what's the point of releasing it?
Yeah, so that's something that I think going forward that doesn't need to be released. That's not important, not really relevant. The legal case has happened, and then the NHL handles their code of conduct. Those are two separate things, more or less.
Yep.
And they don't need to cross over. The NHL doesn't need to be making claims about what happened in the legal case. So
I think they were just justifying their decision to let him play. It's like, okay, we in retrospect, we were right to let him play because
he should have been playing. There was no reason why he shouldn't have been playing, because again, you are innocent until you are proven guilty, and God forbid if they didn't let him play and then it came out that he was innocent, like what exactly happened. Gosh, I mean, then you feel like a jerk, and you, like we were talking about the broadcaster or sports broadcaster in Canada, you don't want to ruin somebody's career because somebody has accused you. Nothing against people who are accusing it. I think that people should come out and do that. But when you have all of this hostile environment and you have these hot button issues where you feel like the league isn't handling it correctly, you're bound to have people have very strong opinions about it, and it creates if you're a victim or, if you're a cab driver, you may not even want to go and report that Kane punched you because you're afraid of what people are going to say to you because you don't know how it's going to be handled.
They do get an avalanche, and it's bad.
Yeah.
Couple things to close out the show here. Tyler Myers, defenseman for the Winnipeg Jets, shut down for the season with a knee injury. Mike Camilleri shut down by the New Jersey Devils with I think it was a shoulder injury, but I'm not 100% sure. Russ, I have a feeling with these teams that are at the bottom of the standings, if you have a boil that needs to be lanced, you're out for the season.
Yeah, Don Maloney said it a couple of weeks ago. He said, yeah, we probably didn't try as hard as we should have last year. I mean, listen, teams are doing it now. I mean, it's the way it is. I wish the system would change. Like I told you, we've gone into that. I won't go into it now. But until you don't, this is what's going to happen.
Right. Be great or be awful. Being mediocre doesn't help you.
Dan,
right.
I'm sorry, and from the point of view of somebody who has been an observer of the Maple Leafs over the number of years, the thing that drove Leaf fans the most crazy was not the fact that the team stunk, was that the team at certain points, was that the team at certain aspects was good, not good enough to make the playoffs, but not bad enough to finish dead last.
The Devils are going through it too.
And they would make this pointless run at the end of the season in March, and instead of finishing with the second pick, they'd finish with the fifth or sixth or seventh pick. And to me, that's counterproductive. So I don't blame these teams. Like if Brandon Sutter has a hangnail, them shutting him down for the season. They're paying him the money. So why should they? Why should the organization? We want you not to play. We want you to be 100% healthy for next year.
I think you just have to also be careful that you're not fighting for last place. You're not stopping playing. I think that's where, as a fan, I don't want to see if like you said, if he has a hangnail, okay, he's got some type of injury, but I don't want people to be purposely losing. My team to be losing.
I think too the difference too with the Maple Leafs, in years past you were going on runs with at least now like you guys are playing really hard. You do play competitive hockey. And the reason you've been successful lately are not because of guys who are 38 years old you have no plans for. They're because of guys like you're seeing Nylander play now. Like, okay, here's someone to get excited about. Here's someone it's going to be part of the solution and not part of the crap that they've been going through.
Okay. Last thing, talking with some hockey reporters last night, there was some concern over the Caps, the Kings, the Hawks, all having this sort of pre-playoff lull. I think the Hawks have lost 3 or 4 games in a row. The Kings, they're 6-3-1 in their last 10, but they haven't played as well the last couple of days. The Holtby's goals against and save percentages, human rather than superhuman over the last. To me, I think this is worry for the sake of worry. I don't think that that they really. There should be any concern.
They just want the season to end. That's all they want.
Yeah.
Yankees Hawks fans, I don't know why Hawks fans are worried. It's not like they are a team that has been losing a lot recently in past years. Like they're fine. They shouldn't be worrying. If it was a team where you're used to them choking, maybe I could get the sense of being a little worried. But come on.
Yeah, and the Hawks are playing with house money. They won last year. They've won 3 of the last 6 years. Even if they don't win the cup right now, I have no sympathy for them. The team that I observe and report on, they haven't won a Stanley Cup and been in a Stanley Cup final since I was a month old. So I have no sympathy for them.
The dynasty year Yankees used to take the entire month of September off. They really did.
Especially the year that they beat a certain other team in another borough.
Yeah, I think they were seriously like 5-20 in September that month.
Yeah.
Keep enjoying it, Mike, while it lasts. You won't be there for a while. Don't worry.
We'll see. We'll see. Yeah, Matt Harvey. Ooh, sorry. Okay, guys.
Matt Harvey and Bryce Harper are going to look great in pinstripes.
Yeah, they will.
Here's the thing, though. All right. You brought it up. I will tell you. You can mark it down here. Matt Harvey will be a Boston Red Sox. He will not be a New York Yankee. You watch.
Okay.
We'll see.
March 24th, 2016.
So he'll get traded there next year. He'll get traded next year with 2 years left on his deal.
Actually, that would be the smart move. If you're not going to re-sign him, it would be next season. Yeah, that would be the smart move.
They'll never trade him to the Yankees.
But Bryce Harper's going to be a Yankee. Write it down.
Well, last thing. Wasn't the last trade between the Yankees and the Mets, wasn't it Robin Ventura for...
It was.
Was it for Dave Justice, wasn't it?
Yeah, Justice. And then Justice got flipped.
Yeah, so... Okay, guys, great show. We'll be back tomorrow with another edition of the Hockey Buzzcast. For Jillian Fisher, for Dan Petru, for Russ Cohen, I'm Michael Agello. And remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.